I am in university right now, but staying with my parents at their house for the summer. I was hanging out with one of my friends and we decided to go to a party. I met this guy around my age. We were talking and having fun, but it was nothing too serious, or so I thought. We exchanged phone numbers. We hung out a couple of times, but he became incredibly clingy right from the start, so I decided to kind of distance myself in the hope that he would just get the hint and back off. Well, you see, he didn't. When I stopped responding, he sent me over 100 messages, with each message becoming increasingly more aggressive as time went on. Keep in mind, it had been less than 2 weeks since we had first met. I finally responded and told him that he needed to chill out. He appeared to calm down a bit after I responded, but he then asked for a phone call. I agreed and we talked for a while. He told me that he couldn't stop thinking about me, that I was the best thing that ever happened to him, etc. Just a bunch of stuff that is way too intense to say to someone you barely know, you know? I tried to let him down gently, reminding him that I was only home for the summer and wasn't looking for anything serious beyond a little fling. But this only made him angrier. He started yelling at me, insulting me, calling me all sorts of terrible names, and basically a complete 180 from what we had just been saying mere minutes ago. And then all of a sudden, the phone went silent. After a pause, he said in a quiet voice, "You better get ready, because I'm coming for you." And then he hung up the phone. This was terribly frightening because he knew my parents were out of town for the week and that I was staying at their house alone. However, he didn't know where my parents' house was because I was always the one driving and he didn't know my friends either, so I thought that he had no way of figuring it out. Since, again, I'm normally living at school in another state, and regardless, I locked all the doors and shut the blinds just in case. After a while, maybe an hour or so, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I looked at my phone and saw a notification on my lock screen. It was from the Ring app, indicating that there had been movement on my parents' camera. It was him. If you watch the video, you can clearly see something in his hand. When he notices the camera, however, he decides to leave. I immediately blocked him on everything and reported the incident. I have no idea what he had planned to do once he got here, and it was terrifying to realize that he had come over when I was asleep and defenseless and completely unaware of his presence. As I would later find out, he was able to get my address from my phone number. Apparently he Googled it and it returned my dad's name as the owner of the phone number, along with my parents' address. Since I am on my parents' phone plan, I guess it shows up that I still live there. This revelation was absolutely horrifying, as I never knew my phone number could just reveal my home address like that. I am still incredibly upset that this kind of private information is on the internet for anyone to find, as it's incredibly dangerous that websites would just give this away to anyone. Please learn from my mistakes, and do not give anyone your phone number unless you trust them. I found out that you can get a free Google Voice number to text and call people, and that number can't be traced back to you so easily. My advice is to use a disposable number for anyone you're talking to that you meet informally or online. I still can't sleep at night, and hopefully this never happens to anyone else. This story was when I was younger and braver and kind of did stupid stuff without thinking. It's a wild ride, and it's all true. I used to work at a pizza shop down the street from 2 p.m. until they closed. I usually didn't get off until around 11 or so at night. I had a car but was close enough to walk, so I did that most days to save gas. This particular night I was doing my usual thing, jamming to one of my playlists, tired but happy to have a good job and just generally happy with the way my life was going at that time. Now up ahead, about a block from my place, I see an attractive guy in dark clothing walking, but not with a purpose really. He was taller than me, maybe 5'10" to 6 foot or so, and had shaggy brown hair. The closer I got to him, the more I could tell that he was really good looking. Like even in the dark of night, I was starting to actually get excited. His features kind of escape me now, but I do remember his hair and his thick eyebrows. I took an earbud out, and because I'm from a dangerous city and never really cared about stranger danger, I decided to talk to him, maybe even flirt a little bit. "Hey, how's your late night going?" "It's good. Just looking to get drunk." "Oh, well, that I can help with. I got a mini bar at my place. I just live down the street." That was not verbatim how the conversation went. During the walk back to my place, I got no red flags from this guy. He seemed totally normal, and I was honestly thinking, wow, just through sheer luck I meet this super hunky guy, and he seems cool and fun. I was beside myself, really. So we get to my apartment on the second floor. I jump into host mode and offer him to have a seat and make himself comfortable. The apartment is about 640 square feet, so it's very small. Except for the bathroom, you can see the rest of the apartment from my area. I head into the kitchen, and while I'm pouring drinks, I glance back over at him. It was then that I noticed the first red flag. As I was asking him questions, he's more delayed with his answers, especially more so than he was on our walk there. It was just very odd to me. I go back over to the couch, pass him his drink, and sit down next to him. "So, what do you do for work?" "Oh, I'm not here to hook up." He puts his drink down on the table. "What do you mean? I'm not after that either." And he stands up. "What you got?" he asks me. His nice guy vernacular and friendly face are now gone. I'm having a hard time processing what he even means by this. I said, "What do you got?" The second I stand up, he pushes me back. I fly across the room, hitting the floor, but not hard enough to pass out or anything. I just get right back up, but he's already grabbed my laptop and my work bag. As I start towards him, he cuts around me and makes his way towards the front door. I'm right behind him when he makes it outside. I manage to grab hold of him, and we tussle again in front of the door. Now I shout out, calling on help from the neighbors. It's late at night, so no one comes, and I'm just shouting, "Please help, I'm being robbed." The thing is, he has my laptop. It's not just any laptop. I hate to admit it, but my entire life was on that laptop at the time. Important photos that I didn't have backed up, thousands of dollars of musical programs, video game programming stuff for a development team that I helped, really expensive software. It was, in my mind, irreplaceable. I give chase down the stairs, across the dog walk park, and as I start to gain on him, we tussle again. The only thing I can focus on is that laptop. I knew that I had to, at any cost, get my laptop back. And that was absolutely all I cared about. Somehow I get a grip on my laptop. I tug at it again, and I guess he decides I'm not worth all of the struggle. He gets up and starts to take off again. I now realize that he still has my work bag. It has my cell phone and wallet with my license, debit card, AAA card, etc. in it. I take off towards him again, and this time he shouts back at me, "Follow me and I'll stab you again." This makes me stop in my tracks, and he gets away. Underneath a street lamp, along the sidewalk, I immediately inspect myself. Was I stabbed? No way, there's no way. And then I see blood running down my leg. I see blood on my arm. 2 places where he cut me good. I'm scared, but the blood makes it look worse than it is. And I decide that's enough. I got my laptop, and that's all I really wanted anyway. I hobble back home and get inside and lock my door. I called the cops using my friend's phone the next day and filed a police report explaining the situation, showing the stab wounds and declining medical services. I can't afford that, and I was fine, all things considered. So, all the guy got was a crappy cell phone and a wallet with like $30 to $40 in it. The cop called my friend back several days later and said that they weren't able to find the guy and that he would probably keep me posted. Now, this was years ago, so I don't know where that robber is now, but I have every electronic thing of importance backed up on multiple drives to this day. A few years back, when I was around 18, I entered a very rebellious phase in my life. I'd always been a prodigious child, always doing as I was told, never staying out late, not smoking, not drinking, and scoring the highest in all my classes. My family, my friends, and my friends' families all thought that I was the perfect kid. But then something changed. I was on a lot of medication due to my health, and I started going through bouts of depression. I began acting up like never before, stopping going to school, staying in bed all day, not talking to anyone, and slowly I started talking to strangers online. Initially, it was just online conversations. I would chat with a few people until I found someone interesting. I'd dedicate all of my time to talking with them until they no longer held my interest, and then I'd just move on to the next person. This went on for about a year. Eventually, I began meeting these people in person. Most of these encounters turned pretty intimate, and I was very reckless. I engaged with more people than I'd like to admit. Despite my lack of concern for my own safety, I somehow never met anyone with evil intentions. We'd meet a couple of times, engage in these intimate activities, and that would be it. However, everything changed when I met one particular guy. I was talking to a couple of guys at that time, not in any sort of relationship, just being very carefree. This guy started talking to me and asked me about my hobbies, interests, and what I did. I told him I didn't smoke or drink, which shocked him. I explained that I had tried them before, but they just weren't my thing. We chatted for a couple of weeks. I eventually opened up about my depression, and at first, he simply listened. Gradually, he started suggesting that I try smoking to relieve my anxiety and stress. I consistently turned down his suggestions, but he remained persistent. After about a month of online conversations, we decided to meet up. We had never discussed anything intimate, so we planned to meet as friends. I was also supposed to meet another guy, an acquaintance, for something I needed, so I proposed to the online chat guy that we briefly meet for lunch and then he could just drop me off at the other guy's place. He agreed, and we settled on the details of where and when to meet. On the day we were supposed to meet, we met at a local cafe, had brunch, and then I got into his car for him to drop me off at my next destination. It was about a 45-minute drive, so I put on some music and decided to relax. About 5 minutes into the drive, he offered me a cigarette. I declined initially, but he insisted persistently until I eventually gave in and agreed. When I opened the box, there was only one cigarette left. I mentioned that it was his last one and asked if he was sure if he wanted me to smoke it, since he probably enjoyed it more than I would. He confirmed, so I took the cigarette out. There was something odd about it. It didn't look like a store-bought cigarette. It seemed like it had been hand-rolled. However, I wasn't experienced enough with cigarettes to be certain, so I lit it and tried to smoke it. I couldn't even smoke half of it as it made me incredibly nauseous. I gave up halfway through and offered it to him. Instead of smoking it himself, he extinguished it and threw it away. I thought it was strange, but just assumed that he didn't want to smoke while driving. About 30 minutes into the drive, I started feeling extremely sick. My whole body shook and I was overcome with nausea. I could barely keep my eyes open. I repeatedly told him that I wasn't feeling well and suggested that we go to the nearest emergency room instead of our original destination, but he told me to relax and lay back. The entire ride felt off. I asked him to stop the car and let me out wherever we were, and he refused. My only thought was to reach for my phone and call the police. When he noticed what I was doing, he immediately stopped the car, and I got out. I couldn't stand, so I sat on the roadside and called the guy I was supposed to visit. He promptly came to pick me up and took me to his place, and I ended up vomiting multiple times in his living room. For the next hour and a half, I laid on the couch, shaking uncontrollably and constantly vomiting. The guy gave me water, electrolytes, and urged me to go to the hospital, but I declined. I had no idea what I had smoked, but I was sure that it wasn't just a plain old cigarette. I was scared that it might have been an illegal drug, and if the hospital found out, I could get into trouble. I absolutely did not want my parents to discover what I'd been up to, so I remained there, enduring the sickness and allowing whatever that substance was to leave my system. Years later, I'm now married to that guy who rescued me from the roadside and helped me through an incredibly embarrassing and terrifying time. To provide context for the story, I was having a sleepover at my best friend's house in the summer of 2019, as we always did. We were both 15 years old at the time. She lives in a small village where everyone knows each other. There were no weird people there, and it was a super safe place, and everyone was kind and friendly. It was around 10 p.m. and the outside was really dark. We were feeling hungry and wanted to bake cookies, but they didn't have all the necessary ingredients. Therefore, we decided to walk to the nearest convenience store, which is about a 5-minute walk away in the darkness since there's no streetlights. As we walked towards the store, we chatted and laughed about literally anything. On one side of the road, there was a huge church that had been built in the end of the 1800s. Although abandoned, they couldn't demolish it due to its historical significance. There was also a large parking lot right in front of the church, illuminated by small orange lights. On the other side of the road was the store we needed to go to. As we passed by the sidewalk in front of the church, we heard a weird classical music playing faintly, like a whisper. Our attention turned to the parking lot, and that's when we saw him. I still get goosebumps just thinking about it. There were no cars on the road. No one was outside. It was dark and cold. We saw a man, very tall and very disheveled. His clothes were torn, and he appeared as if though he hadn't showered in months. He was dancing in the church parking lot, performing ballet moves to a classical song at 10 p.m. on a random summer night. Upon seeing him, we immediately switched sidewalks to keep our distance. Our hearts were racing as we entered the store, got what we needed, and approached the cashier. And overwhelmed with panic, we told her about the man dancing in the parking lot. She seemed confused and went to the window to look, but there was no one there. Our fear escalated as we stepped back outside. Neither of us had cell phones, so calling her dad to pick us up wasn't an option. We took a deep breath and decided to take the path through the neighborhood behind the convenience store instead of the main road in front, hoping to minimize our chances of encountering the man again. We walked along the dimly lit streets, our bags in one hand, constantly glancing around. When we finally reached the main street, we were almost terrified out of our wits. The man was there, dancing on the sidewalk right in front of my friend's house. Panic surged through us. I started to cry softly as we turned back into the neighborhood. My friend suggested that we go to the house of some schoolmates who lived nearby, so we did just that. And at first he didn't believe us and was hesitant to escort us to my friend's house. It was nearly 11 and he looked tired. However, I think he changed his mind after seeing our tears. He put on his shoes and we began making our way to the main street. As we walked, we recounted the events to him, but when we reached the sidewalk, there was no sign of the man. He was nowhere to be seen. He walked us to my friend's front door and we expressed our gratitude before entering the house and locking the door. We shared everything with her parents, but they just chuckled and brushed it off, saying that we were being overly dramatic. They insisted that the village was one of the safest places and that we must have been mistaken or something. Now, at the age of 19, neither of us still have any idea what transpired that night. Nonetheless, we've stopped going out after dark. Occasionally we discuss it, and neither of us can provide an explanation for who he was or what he was doing there. So this happened a while back when I was probably around 10 to 11 years old, meaning my brother Alex was around 8 to 9 years old. We were walking home from the bus, which takes about 7 minutes, when I noticed something was off. I didn't see anything at first, but I just knew that something was wrong. My brother and I started walking home as the only two who got off at our stop were him and me. A blue and silver beat-up truck drove past us, and I thought nothing of it. It never slowed down or stopped. It just kept going. Alex and I were holding hands, as my grandmother always told me to do that with him because he's my baby brother and I just want nothing to happen to him. And nothing happened at first, but then the same truck drove by again, coming our way this time. There was a cul-de-sac at the end of the road. It was driving slower this time and went up the road and turned out of sight. Alex and I were nearing the three-way intersection that connected the cul-de-sac road to the other side road, right off the main road the man had just driven down. I happened to look down the street and saw the truck driving very slowly down the street towards us again. I knew we had to run. I knew that there was no other option. I knew that if we didn't, my brother and I would not be safe. I don't know how I knew, but I did. As soon as we passed a house that blocked us from view, I turned to Alex and spoke to him with exactly 4 words. No questions. Just run." And we did. In our driveway, which is about 100 feet long, there is a row of bushes and pine trees that divide our home from the next door neighbors. I dragged him in there and told him to be quiet, that I'd explain later. I watched as the same truck drove down and around the cul-de-sac again before coming to a stop right in front of our house. I had to hold my brother's mouth shut because he was crying, and I was scared that whoever was following us would hear him and hurt us. I was more worried for him than I was for myself at that point. I was in fight-or-flight mode. I was the big sister, and I had to protect him. I looked at him and said that the truck was following us and told him not to be scared. I said I wouldn't let anyone hurt him, and it seemed to calm him down a little. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the door to the truck opened and out came a man. He was tall, skinny, and unkempt, short hair covered by a torn baseball cap, ripped jean shorts, and puke green tank top. He entered our yard and looked around a bit. Alex and I were still in the bushes, and I was trying to find a way to get to our house safely without attracting this guy's attention. The man left after what felt like forever and got into his car. He started it and drove away slowly. I waited a few minutes to make sure that he was gone before turning to my brother and saying, "We need to run. When I count to 3, we're going to run behind that house to the back door, okay?" He agreed, and we waited a few more seconds before I started counting. I still didn't have a good feeling about this, but I knew we had to move. I started counting, and as soon as I reached 3, we sprinted across our driveway and into our front yard to go around the house. As soon as we left our hiding spot, I heard it, the sound of an engine accelerating. He had seen us. He had been waiting for us to leave. He chased us up our driveway as we ran around the side. I grabbed Alex's hand and practically dragged him around the house, making him run ahead to the garage door to see if it was locked while I searched for my house key about 20 feet away from me. The garage door was open. I swear to God I saw this man round the opposite corner of the house that we did as I entered the house. We entered, and I slammed the door shut, locking it and deadbolting it. I didn't stop running until I opened the house door, and I ran downstairs with Alex, screaming our safe word. My grandmother had given us a safe word that was a normal, everyday word that we could use if we were in danger, and we just screamed it, basically. It woke my aunt, who worked the night shift and was sleeping. We told her everything, and she stayed up with us until my grandmother got home. We called the police, and that was my first ever interaction with an officer, and the man was never caught. To this day, I don't know what he wanted, but I'm sure it wasn't good. I'm just glad my grandma drilled stranger danger into my head. I don't know where my brother and I would be right now if she hadn't. I want to start this off by stating that this is my first ever Reddit post, but I've always loved listening to the stories of this subreddit on YouTube, and I wanted to share my own. For some background info, I'm female and was 17 at the time of this story. I used to work at a pizza place in my hometown. The job sucked in many ways, but the worst part about it was that my manager had no problem leaving girls alone to close. Granted, the town I grew up in was small and boring, and many people left their doors unlocked, but I still thought it was risky. On this particular night, I was closing the shop alone at around 10. The last thing that I had to do on my way to my car was take the garbage out, and the dumpster, as well as my car, was located on the side of the building. While I was making my way to the dumpster, I immediately noticed a man making his way towards me from across the shop's parking lot. He's wearing jeans and a black sweatshirt, and he had some sports cap on. Right off the bat, my heart dropped and I got incredibly nervous. I threw the trash away and began speed walking to my car when this guy says something. "You got a cigarette?" My paranoia told me the question was sketchy as hell, and I struggled to respond for a comment. I just said no and got into my car, hastily trying to get in. And I kid you not, as soon as I closed my door, he booked it to my car and tried to open it. Obviously, it was locked by that point. I instantly started bawling and turned my car on. The man clubbed my window with his fist a few times, without a word, before booking it again into the nearby streets. I called my mom and then the police once I got home. They opened up a small investigation but could never find the guy. There was no other cases of something like this happening somewhere else in town, and so I think he probably relocated somewhere else to avoid being caught. I really have no clue what that man wanted to do. Now, I know this might have been kind of lame or anticlimactic, but it was pretty damn scary to me. A couple of weeks ago, someone had dropped groceries at my door with 2 coffees. The groceries were very odd. It had lubricant, lollipops, not your normal grocery shopping list. I thought it was delivered to the wrong apartment, and as there was no receipt on confirmation in the bag, I left it in the lobby, but no one claimed it. A week later, a letter was slipped under my door with $200 in it. The letter was by a man talking about his recent hardship and how he'd like to talk to me and hear my voice. Again, I was a little naive, so I took the note to my building manager thinking it was for someone else. He thought it was strange, so called the number on the letter, and it turns out it was a man in the building next door saying that he wants to be my friend. The buildings are really close together, and you can see into the apartments if the blinds are open. My building manager told him to leave me alone and to stay out of the building. I thought it was over, but today I heard someone pacing in the hallway outside my apartment for a couple of minutes. I went to leave an hour later, and there was a coin in front of my door, dead center, like it had been placed there. The only way that it could have gotten there would be if it was placed or if my neighbor dropped it, as my neighbor should be the only other person that walks past my door, but based on where I found it, it makes me feel like it was deliberately placed there. I wouldn't think twice about the coin, but with what's been happening, it's making me really anxious. Update. 2 days after the coin incident, I left my apartment, and a man in his 60s or 70s approached me straight away telling me that he's selling his car and if I want to take a look at it. So I have a number plate, and I think I'm going to report that to the police. I was 22 and living on my own for the first time when this happened back in the mid-90s. I had just gotten off of work at 11 p.m. To reach my apartment building, I could either walk on the sidewalk, lit with street lamps and decently trafficked, or cut across the communal garden, which is pitch black and set back from the street. I saved about 1 whole minute of walking time by cutting through the communal garden, but being young and stupid, a lot of times I took the shortcut. That night, I got the weird feeling to not take that shortcut. I kept to the sidewalk, but there's no one else around. When I got past the garden, all of a sudden, this large man pops up from its exit path. There was no way that he could have been in front of me or just behind me as I was walking. I would have noticed him. The only logical explanation was that he had been hiding in the pitch-black garden. A drunk who had been sleeping it off, maybe. No. My body was screaming at me to get the hell out of there. I began walking faster. My dad had taught me to always carry my keys in my fist with a key pointed out in case I needed to punch someone, so I had that, but I'm 5'4" and probably weigh 110 pounds. This guy was tall and big, and my only chance was to outpace him. I'm speed walking at this point, and I feel him matching my pace, getting closer. He's breathing heavily. I feel this angry energy coming off of him, but my apartment building is right there, so I put on a burst of speed. When I reach the entrance, 2 people are leaving and hold the door for me, and it's him. I don't know why I didn't tell them I thought this guy was following me. My mind froze and I was just trying to get inside my apartment, plus I was still trying to rationalize all of it. Maybe he was visiting someone in the building. Maybe it was all just a coincidence. Don't be paranoid, I told myself. Besides, it took only a couple of seconds for them to be out of the door, and I had missed my chance. I'm climbing the stairs as fast as I can. It's a 3-story building and I live on the 3rd floor. He's climbing the stairs too, still right behind me. I get to my floor, which has 4 apartments on the right side where I live and 4 on the left. I pass my apartments 1 and 2 and he's still right behind me. I stop at the apartment 3 where I live, and he stops in front of apartment 4 where I know he doesn't live. He hasn't said anything, just breathing hard, and I think there's no way that I'm going to open my apartment door and have him push me inside and possibly do terrible things to me. He also hasn't knocked on the door of apartment 4. Now, worth noting is that the apartments are U-shaped, with mine and my neighbor's door being very close together, so I bang my apartment door as loud as I can, but yell my neighbor's name, screaming, "Kevin, Kevin, let me in." And this startles the guy. Even more so when my apartment door doesn't open but Kevin's does. Kevin sees the guy standing right in front of his door and asks what he wants. The guy starts mumbling something about the wrong apartment, but I have my own door opened so fast that I'm inside my place in a flash, locking the door behind me. I grab my cordless phone to call the police, but I hear Kevin through the door telling this guy that he needs to leave, and the guy does. Kevin knocks on my door, asks if I'm okay. I thank him, say that I am, but inside, I'm still frozen, adrenaline pumping, terrified. I thank him again and tell him to have a good night, and I lock my door again. I have my phone in hand, ready to call the police, but I start trying to rationalize it again. What exactly happened? A guy followed me home, but then said that he had the wrong apartment. Are the cops going to care about something minor like that? I try to calm myself down, but I'm also berating myself. Why didn't I run the instant I felt him following me? Why didn't I tell the people we passed when the front door opened that I thought I was being chased? Worse, why didn't I tell Kevin that the second he opened his door and saved me, he could have let me inside his apartment and we could have called the cops together? Because of my stupidity, everything felt so ambiguous and I was still questioning myself. A couple of weeks later, I'm visiting my grandparents and my grandfather is reading the paper. He tells me that a woman was assaulted in the apartment building across the street from mine. And it was the same guy. He had multiple convictions for assault and had recently been released on parole. I came home around midnight to the house that I share with 4 roommates. When walking on the sidewalk, I noticed a man across the street facing the other side, seemingly doing nothing. I passed by and entered my house, locking the door, and went to the kitchen, passing one of my roommates on the living room couch. The hallway from the front door opens into the living room and then to the kitchen. When I left the kitchen, I saw a dark outline through the door window and stopped to focus my eyes. My couched roommate looked at me confused as I had just stopped in my tracks. The outer door was open and the man from across the street was looking in and then started turning the knob. As I heard the knob start rattling, I said something like, "There's a guy at the door." My roommate got up from the couch alarmed and we together got closer to the door. I could see the man's face clearer now, pressed up against the door window. His face seemed to be blank. He only had long, oily hair and pockmarks on his cheeks. His expression made me feel incredibly uncomfortable as it seemed that he was looking through us with no recognition of us actually being there. My roommate called down to my basement roommate to make sure that his door leading to the backyard was locked. I got closer to the man as he kept trying the handle to go upstairs and alarm my other roommate. When we came back down, the man wasn't at the door, so we peered out the window to see him standing in our walkway looking across the street again. Reflecting on this, I'm just happy that I remembered to lock the door because we'd often stupidly forget and spend the night with the door unlocked. I could imagine if the door was unlocked and he had stepped into our house. I wonder how that would have went. I think about how he probably would have walked through the hallway and my roommate on the couch would have just seen this stranger walk into our living room and scare the life out of him. Most likely this guy was just drugged out of his mind by his expression, but who knows what his true intentions had been. So I was in grade 9 at a really terrible school. The system there sucked and it was located in a dangerous area of the city I lived in. I actually just remember the story because it was so usual for things like this to happen there that, for me, it was just normal, so I forgot it. But looking back at it now, I realize that it was very abnormal. So I was in PE class and we were running laps around the school on the sidewalk to stretch. I was with my friend group of 5 girls and we were walking behind as always because PE for us was talking about the school drama all period. So we were walking and talking about the recent drama when a red truck slowed down beside us. It wasn't unusual. Every time we were walking outside of the school, a creepy man would slow down, so we didn't think anything of it and just kept walking and tried to ignore him. We saw his truck 2 or 3 more times. He was driving around the school and slowing down every time he passed by us, so we decided to tell our teacher. That made us go back inside and in the gym. We started playing whatever game we were doing when the teacher came to me and told me that I was asked to the main office because someone was here to pick me up. I was panicking because no one was supposed to pick me up during class that day, and I thought that maybe something bad had happened to either my mom or dad or someone in my family. So I got changed into normal clothes, grabbed my backpack, and rushed to the office. When I got there, the lady told me that there was a man waiting for me outside of the main doors. I got a little confused because usually when my parents came to pick me up, they'd wait in the hall until I got there. I took a look through the glass door and saw an old man. I had never seen this man once in my life. I quickly walked back to the office and told the lady that I didn't know him, and what she told me next left me frozen. She told me he said that he was a friend of my parent and that they had asked him to pick me up because my mother got into a car accident. He told the lady my name and my last name, my age, my mom's name, and the grade that I was in. I was shocked and immediately asked her if I could call my parents to confirm. So I called my dad and he told me my mom was just fine and he was at work. The lady just told me to go back to class and I never saw that man again. I never knew what happened after I left, and how did he know all of that info about me? My parents talked to the cops about this and they never came back with anything, and we never got any answers. I'm a 23-year-old female, and my friend and I went to our hostel in Poland and could not get the door to open even though we had the code. These 2 men who claimed that they were also staying there offered to help us, but we couldn't get in until someone else came out of the building. Now at first, these guys were nice and helped us carry our luggage up the stairs to the hostel. Surprisingly, there was no one at the check-in desk, even though the owner specifically asked that we check in at this time. Because we already knew which room we were supposed to be in, the 2 guys helped show us to our room and we all made pleasant introductions. They were 32 and 33, so about 10 years older than us if I remember correctly, and we informed them of our ages. They left us to get settled. However, at this point we realized that without the ability to check in, we didn't have keys to enter the building or even lock our door. Now here's where things got weird. We were already feeling a bit uneasy about the situation, as it was clear that the hostel was just a converted apartment, but I guess that's what you get for about 10 euros a night. Then we heard a brief knock on the door. Without waiting for a reply, these 2 dudes came back into our room to talk, I think. The younger of the 2 started talking to us about going out that night and asked more questions about us. At this point, my friend and I exchanged looks. He mentioned that I thought that I was the one in charge because my friend looked young, and then he proceeds to stroke his hand down her cheek. But wait, it gets better. He then revealed to us that he had just done some cocaine and proceeded to offer us some, which we both adamantly declined. At this point, I just wanted him out of the room so we could have a chance to think, but this man didn't want to leave. I finally backed him towards the door, but he wouldn't move his body so I could close it all the way, and he kept talking to us even though I was trying to gently shove him out. Eventually, I managed to get the door closed and use my body to hold it shut. By this point, my friend had tried to call the owner multiple times to no avail, so we decided to book another hostel and just leave. We waited until we heard the guys leave and then quickly left for our new hostel. We're currently in the process of getting a refund since we booked and paid the fee online. I'm a 23-year-old female and I have a cousin who's a 27-year-old male who was adopted into the family when he was 12. My uncle and aunt already had 4 kids, all in their 20s and 30s, so I'm not sure why both of them in their early 60s wanted to adopt a 12-year-old. I never had a problem with this cousin growing up, as him and I are the youngest grandkids, so we bonded a lot. I didn't see him often, with living 3 hours away from my grandparents, then my aunt and uncle living another hour away. Over the years, I started noticing pretty odd behavior, like messing with dead birds and just sudden mood changes when talking to him. And then, one day, years later, my dad got a call from my grandmother and she was freaking out. Apparently, my cousin got arrested, and with being in a small town, it was all over the paper. My cousin was arrested for peeping into the underage girl's restroom, planting cameras in the locker rooms, and assaulting a minor. I was only 13 at the time, so I had no understanding of what this meant. The cameras were for my uncle and aunt because they were hoarders. He was charged as an adult and served only a little time. After all of this, I never referred to him as my cousin since. In the following year after, I was in my room alone at my grandparents', and he came in and cornered me, trying to hug me before I left, and I repeatedly told him no, and that he was not supposed to be alone with me since I was younger. I screamed when he wouldn't stop, and luckily my dad found us. Once I was older, my dad told me something deeply disturbing. Before he was put into the foster system as a child, he was repeatedly violated by his own mother. My uncle revealed to my father that they put him into therapy. One day the therapist asked him, "If you were to meet your mom again, what would you do?" And he would respond, "I would violate her like she did to me, but I would kill her first." Needless to say, I don't have contact with this cousin anymore. Three years ago, I, a 21-year-old female, went on a vacation with my family. We stayed in a hotel/resort right next to the beach, and every night my family and I went for a drink or an evening stroll on the promenade. The promenade itself was always filled with a lot of people, especially couples enjoying a beautiful evening walk. On the third day, I couldn't sleep. My brother was still awake, but we had a fight earlier, so I didn't ask him to come on my walk. Now, before you think I was being stupid, it was midnight, I think, and still the promenade was filled with people, so I put on some loose pants and a shirt, nothing fancy, and went for a walk. Normally, I'm quite aware of my surroundings, especially at night, but since there was still so many people around, I put my headphones in and listened to some relaxing music. The walk started off great. I was watching the beautiful nightlife on the promenade and the other resorts. After 30 minutes, I sat on a bench to tie my shoelaces. In the corner of my eye, I noticed a man also stopping and sitting on 2 benches away from me. I didn't find it suspicious yet. I started to walk again and noticed the man also getting up and walking about 20 meters behind me. I slowed down my pace and put my earphones in my pocket. I was getting suspicious but wanted to know for sure. And again, I stopped and pretended to search for something on my phone, and he stopped as well. The problem with the promenade is that it was one long line, so I had to pass the creepy man to get back to my hotel. Since I was still surrounded by people, I felt somewhat safe. In my head, I had the most genius plan to go down the beach and hide behind one of the beach chairs. The beach was pitch black, and in my mind, this was the best solution. I started to speed up, and the creepy man didn't match my pace yet. Then a big group of people passed by, and I made a run for the beach and hid. 30 seconds later, I saw him looking from the promenade in my direction. He was very clearly searching for me. I hoped he'd given up, but he started making his way towards the beach chairs. At that moment, I didn't think and started running on the beach. Once I was far enough, I went back to the promenade and sprinted, completely soaked in sweat. I stopped in front of my hotel and looked back. I had lost that creepy man, and I rushed back to my room. That was the only and last time I went walking out there alone at night. I know I should have asked for help from people around me, so just because you're surrounded by people, don't think you're safe. I was 17 when this happened. I had an early morning shift in a restaurant, and I used a bus to get there. And when I got to my bus stop, someone was already there. And that was strange because it was so early in the morning. I started to walk to my workplace just to notice that the man started to follow me. Seeing the man following me got me scared, so I decided to run. There was so much off with that man. The whole time he looked at the ground, but also started to run when he saw me running. I quickly ran to the back doors and saw him coming the same direction. When I closed the doors, he was just a couple of meters away from me, and I saw that he had tried to open that locked door after me. When I was panicking inside the restaurant, my coworkers came to me and said that someone's trying all the windows to get in. We called the cops, and later they told us that the man was carrying a tiny saw with him. Sometimes I think, what would he have done if he would have been a little quicker than I was? You gotta be quicker than that. Before I begin this story, I would like to add that I'm a 26-year-old female, but at the time of the events, I was 17 years old. Back when I was in high school, this all took place in 2014, I met a girl there who I'll call Carly. Carly was pretty. She had long red hair and friendly dark brown eyes, sort of like Bella Thorne. She always wore bright, happy, colorful clothing and lots of happy, earthy jewelry. She just looked like such a happy and bright person. She had a loud and outgoing, happy personality as well, and Carly and I became fast friends. Everything was great in the beginning. She took me exploring a bunch of abandoned houses in our town. We took a bunch of selfies and pictures together, and she even let me stay the night at her house. Carly kissed me one day in her car, and that led to us actually making out quite frequently after that. One day she began taking videos of us making out on her Snapchat account, and she told me that she was going to send the videos to her ex-boyfriend, Michael. I thought that was kind of weird and random, but I didn't say anything. The next day at school, one of my friends, Allison, came up to me and was very upset. She told me that Carly had sent videos of us making out to her boyfriend, Carson. She asked me why we would do such a thing, and I was very confused and told her that Carly told me that she was sending those videos to her ex who lived in another state. Allison warned me and told me that Carly wasn't my friend. She said she wasn't anyone's friend. I didn't listen and just continued hanging out with Carly. I started dating one of Carly's guy friends who I'll call Garrett, and she didn't like this. One day I walked to Garrett's house and called Carly to say hi while doing so. She told me to be careful, but that she had to go. Garrett and I started walking around his neighborhood talking, and then the next thing I know, Carly shows up out of nowhere with my ex in the back seat of her car, screaming at the top of her lungs that I don't know what I want and that I need to go get in her car so she could take me home. Garrett tried telling her to leave, but she went ballistic and started screaming. So we got into her car. She dropped off Garrett and took me home and was acting all nice to me once I got into her car. She was telling me how much she loved me and how much I meant to her. I ended up staying the night with her that night. I remember becoming emotional in her room because I didn't like seeing my ex who had recently broken up with me before Garrett and I started dating. She climbed up on top of me and started to try to kiss me, and everything went black. I remember waking up the next morning and she took me home. Later that day, I had been admitted to the hospital because I was feeling unwell, reasons completely unrelated, so I was in the hospital for a few days. During this particular day, my boyfriend Garrett, my mom, and Carly had come to visit me. We were all visiting when Garrett kissed me. I didn't know this at the time, but my mom later told me that when Garrett kissed me, Carly had a dark and evil look in her eyes as she stared at me. My mom said the look gave her goosebumps and chills that ran up her spine. She said Carly looked completely evil, like she wished I had just died. Shortly after, I was released from the hospital. Then, a few days later, when I was back at school, Carly completely shunned me. She wouldn't look at me, she wouldn't talk to me. She completely acted as if though I didn't exist. I had no idea what I had done wrong from the time she visited me in the hospital to now. At school, she gave me a very cold and dark death glare. If looks could have killed, I would have dropped dead. I avoided her after that and had no clue what I had done. She just acted like she hated my guts. Garrett and I eventually broke up and I got back with my ex, the one that was in Carly's car that day. And now, after I was first released from the hospital, I noticed this sticky stuff all over the screen of the outside of my bedroom window. I had no idea what it was or where it came from. I was waiting for my boyfriend to get off of work one night. I had gone up there to visit him, and he randomly handed me his phone, so I got bored and decided to go through it. I saw that he had been texting Carly. As I was going through their text, I saw that she had been sending him very illicit photos of herself. And during that time, I was in the hospital, and Carly would come visit me and act like she was my best friend. She was going behind my back and sleeping with my ex, and that sticky stuff on my window. And there was a text to my boyfriend from Carly that said, "Let's egg her house again. That was fun." I immediately started crying, and my boyfriend, of course, was trying to justify all of this, claiming that he had only hung out with Carly because he missed me and that he was upset that I was dating Garrett. Carly never spoke to me again, and when I tried to confront her as to why she would egg my house and get with my ex while pretending to be my best friend, she tried to pin it all on my boyfriend, claiming that he was after her and that she had rejected him. That summer, Carly told all my close friends that I had taken my own life. She started telling everyone that she had loved me so much and that I had screwed her over. But I'm telling you, that look in Carly's eyes, it was like looking into pure evil. It was horrifying. It was like seeing who she really was, and to this day it still freaks me out. Years later, I had spoken to a girl who Carly and I had gone to school with, who was named Maddie, and Maddie and Carly had become the best of friends after Carly dropped me. Maddie told me, "You're nothing like she described you, and she made you out to be this really horrible person, but you're nothing like that." Turns out the reason Maddie and Carly stopped being best friends is because Maddie told me that Carly got her to do cocaine with her one night at a hotel, and then they actually ended up doing it. She told me Carly then left the hotel and went to find Maddie's crush. It was a guy she had been in love with for a while. Carly ended up getting intimate with him that night, dumped off Maddie, and began dating this guy. Maddie's words were, "She's not at all who she presents herself to be," and she truly wasn't. Carly wore the happiest and brightest of clothing. On the outside looking in, she appeared like the most loving person, and she knew how to make you feel so special, like you were the only one who mattered. But there was a real evil inside of Carly, something terrifyingly wrong, something extremely dark and deranged that you could only see once you got close enough to her before she hurt you. I've never seen Carly since, and I really hope I never have to again. So to the girl who pulled me in and made me believe that we were best friends, goodbye. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. EST, and there are super fun live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday nights. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, or send it over email, and you might even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories and big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, Cocaine Carly is coming to get ya.